Good evening and thank you for braving the cold. I have a jumper and a jacket on. I don't have much body fat, I'm being told, but my nutrition must be right. So look, I'm going to be talking about the benefits of nutrition for tennis. We all feed our kids, correct? We try to feed the best that we can, but in my experience over many years, the toughest kids for teenagers, they're influenced by their peers who may not be sporting people, who then offer advice about what would be good foods for them. They tend to eat a lot of junk foods, which obviously are devoid of nutrition, but they taste good according to teenagers. I often see teenagers rock up, is that a scientific word, or at least attend or start a training session underfueled and underhydrated. And that, at the same token, that puts them behind the eight ball already, because it sets in early fatigue. It can increase the risk of muscle cramps, which means they can't actually perform at their best when they're underhydrated and underfueled. In my practice, I often see the young athletes miss meals. Guess which meal is often missed? Breakfast. Why is that as parents? When I've got a 14-year-old, I encourage them to have breakfast every day. Sometimes it doesn't work. Why do you think teenagers miss breakfast? Isn't it they sleep in about the sleep patterns we talk about? Why do you feel they miss breakfast? Sorry? They wake up late, yeah, so that's for the importance of sleep. But once you start missing breakfast, it's actually hard to make up your nutritional needs over the next meals. They often miss morning recess at school. If they do, it may not be an appropriate snack, depending on what they put in their lunchbox. Lunch, maybe hit and miss. And if they've had light lunch and they've got an afternoon training session, they're already underfueled. And if they're underfueled, they find it hard to actually train mid-afternoon. And they try to refuel at dinner. And a 14 and 15-year-old boy eats masses of food at dinner, but the distribution of protein, which is required for growth and development, is lacking. Then they might take, particularly young boys, 16-year-olds, take protein supplements. Not really necessary if you can actually meet your needs from protein-based foods, which is a fuel, what we term as a macronutrient. So the macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Proteins are required for growth and repair and recovery. We'll talk about the protein-based foods. Carbohydrates, they've got a bad rap. Who knows a little bit about carbohydrates and why they've got such a bad rap? Inadvertently, not true.
Dietitians.
Dietitians.
That's the early years. The early years is when he used to talk about carbohydrates and increase weight, eat wrong, it's just eating the wrong time.
Well, the thing is, I mean, carbohydrates are important. It's that fuel that's used for exercising the muscles and also brain, so cognition. So when an athlete starts in an under-fueled state, their blood sugars can actually be quite low. And the intensity of their training in competition can further drop their blood sugar levels, which means they can't think straight. That's why it's important that carbohydrates is the primary fuel. The higher the intensity activity and the longer they actually play and train, the quicker that carbohydrates used up. So that's going to be replenished. We don't have a lot of stock of carbohydrates. We store it in our muscles as muscle glycogen. It's stored in the liver as glycogen, but it's also stored in the blood as blood glucose. Those who may take their blood sugar levels, that's just basically glucose. So if you don't have sufficient carbohydrate, it's hard to get the body moving on a regular basis and for recovery. But at the same token, if that person eats, or the young athlete eats lots of carbohydrate, where can it end up? Yeah. And we've got to be mindful of the amount of carbohydrate they're eating. But most of the teenagers I'm seeing in terms of eating carbohydrates, guess what sort of carbs they eat? Not the nutritious packed ones, but what do we like? Corn chips? French fries? Corn chips? Yeah. Biscuits? Yeah. Mars bars? So discretionary sort of foods. I'm not advocating, I'm not saying you do not eat those foods, but make up your carbohydrates from nutritious carbohydrates that contain dietary fibre, B vitamins. B vitamins help extract the energy from the foods that we eat, but they won't give us energy. Despite what mums and dads might buy for them, buy multivitamin, B vitamins. It won't give you energy. It just helps extract the energy from the foodstuffs that we eat. So the carbohydrate foods that I'm recommending are things like whole grain breads, cereals, wraps, breakfast cereals, not the sugar-laden cereals that teenagers like. What do they like? Anything Kellogg's. I would advocate, and this is trying to teach, as Blake said, trying to teach kids at a young age, develop habits now, because as they get older, it will actually reap benefits as a professional athlete, but also for health benefits. Not only that, it actually increase the longevity as a professional tennis player. Presumably they make it on the circuit. So start off with a good intake of carbohydrates. At the same token, don't be too, harsh in terms of sort of discretionary foods. Call them optional extras, not the main part of their diet. Yeah. Vlad talked about sugar foods, sugary drinks, loaded with just straight sugar but no nutrition. That can actually rob the body of nutrients if they're drinking lots of soft drinks. And you've seen those frozen Cokes and they sell $1. What do they get? There's fluids, but lots of sugar. And that can actually fuel the body, but it robs the body of those nutrients they need to help extract the energy from the body muscles. Is that fairly clear? So try to cut back on the added sugars and also the hidden sugars. A person between 11 and 16 years of age can actually make up their sufficient diet from carbohydrate-based foods based on whole grain cereals, whole grain breads, wraps, fruits and vegetables. To a lesser extent, dairy foods also contain carbohydrates from lactose, which is a naturally occurring carbohydrate in dairy products. So carbohydrates are important to refuel the body and to restock. Underfueling, behind that already trying to make up the energy stores. So it's important that carbohydrates are refueling the body. The other important nutrient that fuels the body in terms of growth and repair, because between 11 and 16, they're in a period of growth. They need to lay down muscle tissue and proteins are important. But if that protein-based food, and I'm sure everyone knows what protein-based foods are, it is flesh-based. Lean meat, chicken, fish, seafood, dairy products. If your child doesn't like any flesh-based products, probably female thing I should say in my practice, then things like legumes, lentils, chickpeas, red kidney beans can also provide protein, also provides fibre, but the protein isn't as high quality compared to say flesh-based foods. Tofu, another example of a non-meat-based protein that vegetarians and females particularly like. So proteins are really important, but the importance is distribution over the course of the day. So some at breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, mid-afternoon, and dinner. And that will be better utilised by the body than not a lot, some, nil, and then a big whack. So it's important, protein distribution, good quality proteins. And that's also required for repair. If they're doing the weight training program, you're tearing the muscle at that cell level, you need to get adequate protein to help repair the muscle, and that's important for recovery. Another form of fuel, basically, is fats. Fats are important, despite people going low-fat diets. But I'm advocating healthy fats, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats from avocados, nuts, olives, extra virgin olive oil, and also oily fish that contain omega-3s. They actually help prevent inflammation and also good for recovery. But I would rather advocate whole foods and not supplements. So always go for the whole foods. They work synergistically as opposed to just having one nutrient. So salmon has the omega-3s, has protein, and they're basically good fats. So it's important to get adequate fats in the diet because that also furnishes extra energy needs. And those three macronutrients, the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, all together end up in the amount of energy that a person needs. And so each athlete needs a different amount of carbohydrate, protein, and fat, and energy depending on their period of growth, weight, height, age, and also metabolism. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, and that's where my role comes into it, is to assess the individual and provide a plan of attack from there. Is that fairly clear? So it's important as a baseline in terms of macronutrients. The other fuels that we talk about are things like micronutrients. Micro meaning small, not because they're not important, because we need them in small quantities. For example, the B vitamins in whole grain cereals. As I said earlier, they help extract energy from the foods that we eat to give the body fuel. The other micronutrients are important are the minerals, particularly calcium. Calcium in that age group is important for bone strength and bone development. So adequate calcium is really important, as is vitamin D. And calcium from dairy foods is the richest source of calcium. So milk, cheese, yogurt, at least 3 servings per day. With 1 serving, a cup of milk, a little carton of yogurt, and a slice of cheese. That basically is a serve. However, if a person or a student or an athlete doesn't like regular cow products, or I say dairy products, then you can go for a non-dairy based beverage, I call them. I don't call them milks. Soy milk, oat milk, rice milk. Anyone knows them as milks? Let's squeeze an almond here, that's milk out. No, not at all. So they're actually beverages. However, if there is a lactose intolerance, and that lactose is actually the naturally occurring milk, carbohydrate in dairy products, if someone's lactose intolerant, they can go for lactose-free type milk, maybe soy milk, but always look at the carton and see if it's fortified with calcium, because some don't have sufficient calcium. Really important to go for calcium fortified products. Is that fairly clear with calcium? Another important nutrient for 11 to 16-year-olds is iron. Iron carries oxygen in the blood, muscle cells, and insufficient iron can actually cause anemia. Anemia means they're running low on energy, can increase the risk of infection, and the immune system actually is compromised. So adequate iron is important. The richest source of iron in the Australian diet is what? Red meat. Good luck trying to get females, young girls, 15 and 16, to eat red meat. It's a tough work. You've got to convince them that's the richest source of iron in the Australian diet. However, it doesn't have to be a lot. It's just got to be a regular. 2 or 3 serves a week, and only about 100 gram a portion, 125. Size of my palm. I haven't got a big palm. It's not that hard. If they don't like a slab of meat, it might be in a bolognese type sauce, it might be in a kebab. At least 3 serves of lean red meat per week to actually increase their level of iron. At the same token, to improve the absorption of iron, include a vitamin C containing food. For example, if it's a steak, there may be some broccoli with that, because there's vitamin C in that, and that will help absorb the iron in that red meat. If they don't like flesh-based foods, you can actually also get iron in non-heme-based foods. Who's heard the beautiful vegetable called spinach with lots of iron in it? Fabrication. There's iron in there, but you don't absorb very much. There's phytates in that prevent it from getting absorbed. So you'd have to eat a ton of spinach to get a significant amount of iron. So small quantities of red meat to help improve the oxygen consumption and flow to the muscles is important. Another important nutrient is zinc. You know about zinc? Wound healing and immune system. Particularly if teenagers are getting sick all the time, they might be compromised in terms of the immune system. Getting sufficient zinc is important. Seafoods, whole grains, dairy products, sufficient to get enough zinc in their system. So they're the sort of micronutrients and also the macronutrients. The other important, I call it weapon, is fluids. Given the heat that teenagers play in tennis in the summer, and one thing to note is that young children don't have the ability to regulate the body temperature like adults. So they overheat very quickly and also dehydrate very quickly. So it's important to use fluids as a weapon in terms of preventing dehydration. Very, very important. So my recommendations in terms of fluids is to drink before, during and after. How do you know they're getting sufficient fluids? I always get them to check the urine. If it's like that yellow, dehydration. If it's something that resembles that lighter colour, probably hydrate. However, if they're taking dietary supplements, it can actually mask the colour of the urine. So it's important to check the urine. Yeah? If they're going to the toilet in 10 minutes, they're probably overhydrated. And guess who overhydrates? Males or females? Females, they're more diligent in actually drinking. Young men, not so much. Women always carry water bottles. So it's important they get adequate fluids in their system. The other thing that actually, well, they've got to replace what's actually lost in their sweat. So water is the choice of beverage in my case. However, in some cases, if they're playing long tournaments, long matches, a sports drink may be necessary. There's nothing magical about a sports drink, people. What's in a sports drink? It's mainly fluid, yes. Tastes sweet. What do you reckon's in it? Sugar, carbohydrate, and there's also some electrolytes, sodium. And if your child is a high salt sweat, how do you know? Well, when their skin dries and it's sort of white cakes on their shorts or skirts, then they're a high salt sweater. That's when you're losing sodium. How do you replace sodium with the diet? The recovery meal might include some protein of their choice, some vegetables, yeah, some carbohydrate to refuel the muscles, sprinkle of that white stuff. It's not, what is it? Salt. Or it might be a stir fry, adding some soy sauce. So you'll get sodium replenishment through additional means in the kitchen. Sodium chloride doesn't cost very much, yet people spend lots of money on supplements.
Gatorade.
Sorry?
Gatorade.
Gatorade? Well, it's possible. Again, they've been out there for 2 or 3 hours. So after a match of 2 or 3 hours of training, the fluid will get into the system very quickly because the salt helps retain the fluid in their body, as opposed to drinking water. You drink lots of water, you go to the toilet, you pee it out. At least with a sports drink, you actually help retain the sodium and the water in your body, which is a good thing. But not in all cases. Having too much sports drinks, what do you think it does for your teeth? Any dentists in the audience? Yeah. In this city. So, too much of a good thing can be a problem. Also, consuming too much drinks, apart from teeth, what else does it do? Not bloating, put on weight. It's all sugar. Anybody know how many teaspoons of sugar in a bottle of Gatorade? 600 ml. 16? Too much. It's only 6% solution, which means 6 grams per 100. About 6 teaspoons in a 600 ml, which is enough. Only if required. Otherwise, the choice of beverage is actually water. Yeah. How much time have we got left? Not much. I could talk about this for hours, maybe 15 minutes. Alright, so combination of bright fuels, sufficient fuels, the right fluids can improve performance. My role as a dietitian, professionally assess your son or daughter's diet, look at their training program, how best can we do that, look at likes and dislikes in terms of food preferences, do they have any allergies, intolerances, any milk conditions. Then it allows me to tailor-make an eating plan. Follow-up appointments are important to see the progression of how they're going with their initial dietary plan. Ongoing educational support is very important. And also work part as a team with GP. So if your daughter has iron deficiency anemia, obviously look at blood test results and how we improve on that. So work with GPs, work with sports physicians if needed, and also allied health professionals, including sports physiotherapists and also exercise physiologists, including the coach, of course. Very, very important to collaborate with all of us together. So on a final note, in terms of 3 Ps, first one is plan accordingly. Nutrition is very, very important. Start with a baseline diet and try to convince the importance of good nutrition, but it starts at an early age. So it's not hard to have a good nutrition plan, as long as they know why they're doing it and how they're going to get the best out of their bodies. Practice the nutrition plan, fine-tune it, tweak it, and see what works best for them in terms of the competition situation, because not everything will work for them at that point in time. That together will help them perform to the best of their ability. I'm done.